My name's Jon. I'm one of the curators here at Te Whare Waikato, and I've got Haylee and I've got Caleb. And yeah, we're going to talk to you about a project that's sort of on a smaller scale. So I want to echo the congratulations to Scott and Kristen on that amazing project. This is sort of a bit like that, but on a much smaller scale, but it's big. It's big for us. And it's been a big learning experience for us. And it's been a good test of our collections policy. It's a bit like a microcosm of all the considerations that we normally have to make, but all at once. And so there were easy yeses, there were easy nos, but this project was all about working in that grey area of in between. And it all started with one of those random inquiries that I'm sure we all get. I just had a note asking me to call someone about some fossils. And so I had no idea what was about to start. A collector had passed away, and his family wanted to fulfill his wish to give his collection to the public. It was always his intention, but a sudden and aggressive illness sadly meant that he couldn't complete his vision. And so after the initial conversation, the family sent through a few photos, and you can see this is a sort of medium-sized room that was just filled floor to ceiling with fossils. We had to just go and sort of see this in person ourselves. And it really had a bit of everything. You can see on the shelves, some things were neatly labeled, and some things were just in these cardboard boxes with little to no labeling on it. So this is where it was in that grey area. So we have these where we've got a complete record. It's perfect for display, a local connection, good condition, a Fred number, even who collected it. So that was an easy yes. And then we'd have boxes like this where it really was a jumble of just trying to figure out what the label was referring to, where they were from. And then we had other boxes that were a bit like this, where clearly some labels were with some things and then other things just had nothing and were a fairly easy no. And so it was all about just figuring out, where are we going to draw these lines? And unfortunately, there was no magic catalog with details about everything, no notes or explanations, and we couldn't speak to the collector. So everything was sort of as it was, just paused in time. The collection was roughly an hour away, so not something that we could easily go and visit easily or too frequently. And the family were also under a time pressure to sell the properties. So we decided, like you said, Scott, take photos of everything. For the sake of a bit of space on an SD card, we just took photos of individual pieces, labels, shelf setups, boxes, and everything. And it's provided us actually a really useful resource to look back on and see how things were at the time. It also allowed us to come back here, go through the photos, and then roughly estimate the numbers. And we came to about 6,000, I think, in the end of in total. And based on our first assessment, we roughly estimated 1,000 to 2,000 would be suitable under our collection policy. We couldn't take everything. There were stunning fossils from Morocco and shells from Florida, but we don't have the space or the resources or the remit to take it all. But even within the North Island, we had a spectrum. So we had the collections that were, or the items that were really local, that were an easy yes. And then we had some others that were slightly further afield. And then in those instances, we had to just consider what information we had about them. Were they part of a sort of mini collection? Were they related to other items that we had? And who was the collector? So we were always moving around in this grey area. But the time constraints and the position of it meant that we had to kind of set a general set of rules for what we were going to take and what we were going to physically put in the van. We made 2 additional trips to basically go and pack and collect everything, recording as much information as we could. The biggest risk of all, I figured, because it was just what we had, was that the loose labels could get disassociated from their item. And if that happened, there would have been not an easy way back. And so the first day of moving, it was pouring with rain. We couldn't get the van up the slippery driveway, and it was threatening to spoil all of our fun. But we managed to bring it into the museum. But even here, I was worried that even just opening the door too quickly could push one of the labels from one fossil to the next fossil and create us some headaches down the track. But in order to talk about the collection once it arrived at the museum, I'll hand over to my colleague Haylee.
Kia ora koutou, ko Haylee Takuingoa, ko Taurihita o Te Wharetonga Waikato. I'm a collections manager here. So bringing the collection into the museum was a huge step, but the practical side of prepping and processing the collection was daunting. Up until now, we've had a relatively small science collection, and within that collection, we have 47 fossils. The majority were skeletal records. Fortunately, we do have one fossil, the giant penguin, that has had significant research done around it and does have a more detailed record. This helped us to identify the areas we wanted to populate in Vernon if we could. Realizing that the cataloguing, accessioning and packing process was going to be lengthy, we knew we needed to break it down into steps and make our lives as easy as possible and limit room for errors. Initially, we took all the boxes and emptied them into drawers/shelves in our cataloguing room so Caleb could then see what he was working with and how to move forward. From there, we developed a simple processing framework that helped guide how and what information we captured in Vernon. We first took the info we knew we had around a portion of the collection and worked back from there, wanting to capture as much detail as possible for those that had it available and build upon others with no info. We set up XML import spreadsheets with the usual basic record information. We are using the name/title as the species name and more detail around the scientific name and the brief description. We've then also added in field collector, collection date, field collection site, field collection reference number, specimen category, specimen details, place description, and stratigraphy context. As Caleb is working through the cataloguing, he's been able to group the fossils by type, which has made this process fairly clear-cut with more detail captured than expected. We hope in time that we'll be able to add to these records as information becomes available from possible researchers. When it comes to accessioning, we've decided to keep it as one accession number with multiple items. So far, this is working well, but will prove tricky with the more. This may need to become a separate accession due to the unique makeup. Of course, all along the way, we've identified challenges or very big questions we're working through, including one significant belemnite collection within the overall collection. This currently still works well within our framework, but with more detail comes in around these items, we may need to consider a different way of cataloguing, but hopefully not. As each item is catalogued and accessioned, we're creating bespoke housing within archival boxes that will be our packing units. We've come across little glitches where we have small fossil boxes of multiples inside larger boxes housing like was like. In this instance, we're still having the one packing unit with multiple boxes inside, well labeled with each accession, all pretty similar to any other large collection, where we are trying to capture as much detail as possible to avoid the chances of dissociation. So far, everything's so good. We still have a while to go with more questions arising, I'm sure, but we have made a dent, and of course we hope to have everything up on browser one day. Hopefully we'll tackle that in stage 2 though. So now I'll just pass over to Caleb to go through the nitty-gritty.
Hello everyone, my name is Caleb, so I'm one of the staff here at the Waikato Museum. I have a background in ecology and biodiversity, and I'm currently doing my master's at the University of Waikato. And I'm lucky enough that I've been involved in this project from those early initial visits up until now and ongoing. So I thought I'd just kind of show you the accessioning process from my end and point out a few kind of notable things along the way. So this is the screenshot that Haylee showed just before, and this is taken from last Friday, so it's quite up to date with where I'm at the moment. So just to the left there, you can see the accession number column followed by the object type, which I'll show a few examples of in just a moment. As Haylee also mentioned, we put the species and genus name under the name and then period if it's provided. The brief description is an area where I can go into a bit more detail about some of the kind of challenges that I'm discussing today, as well as providing quite a brief condition report just to kind of go with each item. What you can't see there is the measurement section and the medium section. So medium is particularly relevant for objects which are still housed in like a sediment layer, which is quite common within this collection. There's also areas for the collection date, field collection reference, place description, and stratigraphy context. And those 4 points are information that we're really heavily reliant on the labels that Jon was discussing. But before I talk too much about the labels, I'll show you just a few cool images. I will warn there are quite a few more bones to come. So here we have some of the bones within the collection. You saw the overall molar skeleton before. The lower image here and to the right are two molar femur from different specimen. Above that, we have just a few examples of some kiwi bones. We also have quite a substantial amount of shells within this collection, ranging from quite small, relatively recent examples to quite prehistoric and fragmented and kind of everything in between. So we're kind of nestling these together where possible, but there are quite some large specimens which are housed on their own. We also have quite a substantial amount of fossilized plant material in this collection. So to the left there, that is two quite large slabs of fossilized wood. And you can kind of get a glimpse of some of the labels that we're dealing with associated with some items. To the right and towards the bottom are some fossilized fern specimens and imprints. And I'll show a little bit more of those in a couple slides. We also have quite a substantial amount of ammonites within this collection. And these range from full specimen, which are the size of, a $2 coin, up until larger examples such as this one, which is approximately 42 centimeters long. And again, kind of everything in between. And as Haylee mentioned as well, there is quite a substantial Balmanite collection, which I'll go into a little bit more detail about soon. And I just thought I would include a few of the kind of odder pieces within the collection, which don't necessarily follow an overall kind of general theme. So to the left, there is an example of two crab claws, and the only information provided with those was a scrap piece of paper that said crab claws. In the middle, I just wanted to show that with the moa, there are some cast replicas that we're dealing with as well. And so far, the process, we've processed these as we would if they were bone, but acknowledging that they are a cast replica. We also have a few various teeth examples. And then I also wanted to include this singular leaf imprint, which unfortunately has no information whatsoever with it, but I thought was a really nice example of some of the just oddities within the collection. So as I've kind of alluded to, everything that I'm putting into the XML spreadsheet comes directly from these labels. And that's why there was so much emphasis put on ensuring that they are kind of accurately kept with the right specimen. So to the left, I have an example of quite a good label. So you can see there's a species and genus name, a clear period, stratigraphy context, there's a field reference and location specifics down to the fact that it was found within a riverbed, as well as the collector and the date it was found. So labels like that are great and make the process quite speedy. Unfortunately, we are dealing predominantly with a few trickier labels where there is some information provided, but it takes a little bit of deciphering for various different reasons to ensure kind of accuracy in each item. So I'll talk more about that particular label in a moment. And to the right, fortunately, we don't have too many items like this, but there are a few items which have either very limited or no information provided with them. This example is a slab of fossilized wood that was quite literally in that box, which just says wood and then a stream name. So we can only assume that that piece of wood was found at that stream, but then we also have the challenge of figuring out if anything else on the box has any relevance to the piece itself, or if this is just a convenient box at the time. I thought I'd show this example as well, just to kind of illustrate some more of the challenges we're having. So this is part of a larger kind of fragmented collection of 12 different slabs of like a larger piece of rock. As you can see, just in these 4 examples, there's various different shell species, imprints, and fragments. But unfortunately, the label only states coral flabellum. With coral flabellum, we're not seeing any direct evidence of coral within the fragment, which suggests either the label is with the incorrect item or potentially the collector was trying to show something that we aren't necessarily seeing in the collection. So some things like this do take a little bit more time to kind of work through, and we do have to conduct a little bit of research on our end just to ensure accuracy. This is the label that I was talking about before, and I just wanted to kind of show just how tricky it can be to kind of read the handwriting. So Glycomeris is the bivalve species, which is predominantly in this kind of conglomerate of different species. And that is accurately identified. But the 3 names below that, we can't find a direct source that we are able to verify A, whether or not the species matches the name, and then B, a species to then compare against to see if it is in that conglomerate. So that is another kind of tricky issue, which takes a bit of time. The photo down the bottom is a draw of the kind of trickier items that I'm dealing with. And as Jon mentioned, there is no magic catalog that we can just refer to for several different reasons with the collector. But as we kind of build this collection, in a sense, we are, in a way, building that foundational base that we can then begin to cross-reference some of the more tricky items against, and again, just add to the accuracy that we're aiming for. And with the Balmanite research, so this is quite a substantial part of the collection, but I haven't directly dealt with the Balmanites as of yet, because we're lucky enough to have the help of a PhD student from Wellington who is conducting research on the Balmanite collection. So at the end of their research, they'll be providing us with a detailed catalogue of each of the individual items, which we'll then be able to use to accession. So the Balmanites is a bit of a watch this space, but that will be a big project on its own. So everything up until now has done with the XML input and the kind of Vernon accessioning side of things. Once I've done that, as Haylee mentioned, making these archival boxes just to house each item as securely and safely as possible. So I just wanted to run through just a few brief examples just to kind of explain what we're doing there. So quite a lot of the items, especially in association with the moa, are extremely fragile, especially this left sternum piece here. So what we've been doing is we've been making up essentially Tyvek pillows using quite small styrofoam balls and quite tediously filling the Tyvek, not too full, but not too empty, and just making sure that it's got enough kind of shape to it to alleviate or any of that pressure on any particular area of bone. But I will mention, I really liked the air pockets that you were using in Christchurch. So that looked really good. That could probably be useful. I also wanted to show, so this is part of the larger collection of the burn specimens I showed before. So we are dealing with quite a few related items that are separated for one reason or another. So we're utilizing just a 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 process, and ideally nesting these items in boxes where appropriate. Within the collection as well, again, for one reason or another, quite a few items might be separated, either intentionally or due to previous damage. So with these, we're taking kind of special caution to nest these items together. And again, we're just following a point A, point B system, which we've found has worked really well so far. The last step of my kind of process is I take a photo, just a singular top-down photo of each item. At the moment, this is mainly for our own reference and to put onto Vernon. But as Haylee mentioned, hopefully part 2 of this project will be photographing each item a bit more in depth and then putting it onto our system. And then I put it in a box and I put it on a shelf.